Historically, one of the most challenging things for a creator has always been nothing, or more specifically, the endless options of opportunities you face when first starting a project, right? It's the blank page if you're a writer, or the empty canvas if you're an artist, or that endless void of a viewport for a 3D artist. It's the reason why traditional painters would prime their canvas by splattering paint all over it, or I like to assume the reason why 3D programs like Blender or ZBrush start with a cube or a sphere in the viewport. Equally, at least in my experience, there seems to be a correlation between the scale or difficulty of a project and the challenge I feel in just simply starting it. Both of these are reasons why I find the new tools that AI is bringing to us so exciting, that they're able to give us new ways to generatively fill those blank canvases and to shorten the time between an initial idea you have in your head and being able to test what it might look like at the end of your project. Today, I want to show you how I've been doing just that when it comes to lighting my 3D scenes in Unreal and Blender. Where now with AI, I'm able to take existing solutions for early stage lighting, skyboxes, and HDRIs, and now with just a few clicks, be able to apply a much more intentional art-directed mood and atmosphere to them, so that while I'm working on a prop or maybe a full scene, I'm able to get a much better feel from the very start on what they might look like at the end of the project once I've fully built out the world around them. As a little preview, here is a scene that I lit in Unreal 5 in less than a minute using this method. But before we get to that, I want to give you an overview of everything that we'll cover in this video. First, we'll do a summary of what a skybox or HDRI is, why you'd want to use one, and how AI is changing the game in this space. Second, I'll show you how to create your own using AI in a much more art-directed way, like I mentioned. And third, I'll do a quick tutorial on how to set them up, or at least how I set them up in Unreal 5 and Blender, which will be completely beginner friendly. So if you've never used 3D before but are considering getting into it, I've got you covered. And for those who stick around to the end, I'll give you a little sneak peek at an upcoming tool that teases the ability to be able to copy and paste art direction from an image directly into Unreal. So that sounds completely crazy and is a bold claim, but it actually does look quite promising and is releasing this year. So we'll save it until the end of the video, but for now, let's just quickly spend a minute reviewing what a skybox is. In short, a skybox is a high-resolution image or procedural texture that is wrapped 360 degrees around a 3D scene to provide a basic background setting and lighting information for that scene. HDRIs are functionally the same for the context of this video, so you might hear me refer to them interchangeably, but they do technically differ from a standard skybox image in that they hold a much higher dynamic range, meaning you can raise or lower the exposure of the scene, and the HDRI in the skybox will still hold enough information to account for those different exposure levels. Okay, great. So why would you want to use a skybox or HDRI? Well, for some projects, it could actually be used in place of the real environment in the distance. For example, not needing to model far off mountains or landscapes or maybe even clouds, but they're also often used as simple placeholder lighting in the early stages of a 3D project. For those of you familiar with 3D projects, you know they can be quite complex. Whether you're in a studio or even just as a solo artist, it means juggling a lot of different assets with varying degrees of development while balancing the overall scene, lighting, and art direction that ties them all together. Every artist and studio works a bit different, but as an oversimplified insight into the process, at least in how I work, I start with an idea or concept in art direction, build out my supporting references, block in my scene, and then bounce back and forth between modeling and texturing as I swap out placeholders for the fully modeled and textured assets, all while continuously evolving and pushing forward step by step the overall look development and lighting within the scene. Since this process takes quite a bit of time, the earlier I can get a feel for how those very initial ideas might look way later in the project, I end up saving a lot of time. This is why stages like block-in exist in the beginning, which is to literally put blocks or very simple shapes in place of different assets. It ends up looking incredibly simple, but practically, it lets me get a good feel for the size and space of things in relation to each other before spending a large amount of time building them out in 3D or texturing them. Now, in order to visualize these scenes early, fortunately, Unreal, Blender, and other software have really simple and easy systems in place to preview them. When modeling in Blender, just like in other modeling packages, you have this ever-present viewport light. You also have extra controls to visualize cavities and shadows, and also an option to quickly toggle into a lit mode that makes use of an HDRI. Or when you're texturing an asset in, say, Substance, you can also preview your work in a simple scene wrapped again in an HDRI. Unreal also has a few different options for this, where with just a few clicks you can create a hyper-realistic sky, and if you want to, even swap in different skyboxes, which you can source from places like Polyhaven, which Unreal points to in its documentation. So at this point you might be asking what the problem is then. Well, like I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for something a bit more art directed outside of, say, a photograph of a garage or a grassy field, say for example a cyberpunk or sci-fi scene or a fantasy setting, you're a bit out of luck, since the way most of these are created is that someone with a camera has physically gone to a location, taken panoramic photos, and stitched them all together to create a 360 skybox. This has gotten a bit easier nowadays, where you can create seamless textures and just create them in CG, or 360 cameras have made the capturing process a bit easier, but most available HDRIs you find online have required somebody to go to that location, photograph it, stitch it all together, and then to offer it up for sale on places like Polyhaven. As a quick example of what I'm talking about, here is an old student project I was working on at Think Tank, which I've since hidden from public, but I think it illustrates this concept well. I was working to replicate this 2D concept art here in 3D. Since it was a 2D concept, I wanted to get a feel for the overall space to make sure the proportions of what I would later be modeling would work in 3D. So as I blocked out the scene, I wanted to throw a skybox placeholder in that had a cyberpunk feel to it. Naturally, I tried to find HDRI images of a city at night, ideally something like Tokyo. Here is what currently exists on Polyhaven, the #1 resource for this that Unreal even links to, for a city at night. You can see that this isn't exactly what I was going for. I did keep looking around the web to find different packs. This was the most popular one I could find at the time. It does have pretty cool images, and they do have a bit of a cyberpunk feel, but I really wanted something that captured that downtown feeling with its skyscrapers around you. So I think it's a good time to take a look at the tool I wish I had then, which is called Skybox AI by the very appropriately named Blockade Labs. Here we are on the Blockade Labs site. As you can see here, they say you can craft an experience in one click. Infinite 360-degree worlds are here with Skybox AI. They're panning through a few examples of things you can really easily generate, and if you've never seen a skybox before, this is what it looks like. And if you click Conjure Your World, it'll take you to inside of Skybox AI itself. You can see it's a really simple UI. Down here, you have a few different options for prompting, and over here you have a few different options for having a little bit more manual control over what's going on. You can just click here at Paint. It gives you a grid room, and you can paint in structures, for example, gigantic doors like here, windows, and as you prompt, it'll use these as guidelines or frames for that. I've never used this. I've never really needed that defined of control, since what I'm really using skyboxes in general for, and especially Skybox AI, is just getting loose, rough lighting into a scene that is a little bit art directed. Then I can build out to more defined lighting that I control more specifically in Unreal or Blender. So we won't use this for now. I just wanted to show you that it exists. I think we'll need to erase this in order for us to generate with prompts without it using this guide. Okay, so here we go. We can drop out these, go back to image view, get rid of the grid. All right, let's type in a prompt. I think we had talked about cyberpunk, so let's try just quite simply cyberpunk city. Here you can see a lot of the different models that it's trained in. Some of them are price locked to paid tiers. Some of them are marked new. They just recently dropped a new pack, which is quite interesting style. It's not really something that I would use. They're very ethereal and psychedelic, but they're really cool. I think what we're looking for here is cyberpunk though. So let's go ahead and hit cyberpunk and just generate. Here's what it gave back to us. It is indeed a cyberpunk city. Has all those prototypical things you would assume would be there. All of the big, tall buildings, the advertisements, the strong LEDs, the environment filled with fog and being at night and mysterious. I didn't even prompt in night, but it just kind of knew. I would have been very happy with this back when I was a student to have found a skybox like this for my scenes. Already a good start. There's of course other options of things that it lets you do. You can remix this, which as it says, you can keep the structure but fine tune the look. You can do things like add in aspects of time of day, weather, materials, visual style. It's a really nice feature if you just want to keep that same structure and just make some adjustments. Or if you have something more specific in mind, you can describe what to avoid. Maybe I don't want specifically red in my scene. I can just prompt out red and it'll get rid of those and keep everything else mostly the same. It's not an exact science in my tests. Like, it does include maybe some red further away, but it does make nice adjustments towards what you're asking it to do. So we go back to create new, get rid of negative prompt. What I use most of the time is this enhance prompt tools. I'll type in a very simple prompt and I'll use enhance prompt, which is based on AI, and I assume tailored to work very nicely with their different models they have. So I just trust that this works very well with this, I would assume. So with Cyberpunk City, let's go ahead and just enhance the prompt and see what it gives back to us. So let's go ahead and generate. Okay, so here's what it gave back to me, and at first glance, I like this so much better. Let's read the description of what it gave us. Neon-drenched skyline, angled skyscrapers, towering holographic billboards, glowing tram lines, star-packed cosmos backdrop. I don't know if we have that necessarily, but VR 360 cyberpunk style, blend of futuristic architecture, high contrast colors, smoky fog ambiance. I really like this. I like that it's a little bit more expansive and spread out, and we don't have those big bright red LEDs right in our face. So I think this will add a lot more of a balanced look to my scene. So I think that this is already something we can go ahead and throw into Unreal and see what it looks like. Here is an option of where you can download. I believe some of these, as you can see with the stars, are locked to paid plans. The one we're going to be downloading is HDR, so you would have to have a paid plan to download this. Let's go ahead and download it and see what it looks like over in Unreal. Here we are in Unreal Engine 5. It's very dark right now because we haven't added any lights, but you can see I've added in some kit bash buildings and props and a little bit of water on the ground so we can actually visualize what things look like when we add in the HDRI skyboxes that we had made. Let's first give it a base lighting that Unreal is kind of known for, that sort of hyper realistic lighting. So if you go to Window, Environment, Light Mixer, it gives you a bunch of options, and let's go ahead and click them and see what happens. So let's add a skylight. Let's add an atmospheric light. Let's create a sky atmosphere, and let's create some height fog. Okay. What you see here are all of those things added. Let's add them to a folder to keep things organized into our base lighting. I've added a post-process volume, which I'll talk about in a second, but here's all of your things. So the directional light is your sunlight. Exponential height fog adds fog to the scene, gives it a little bit of depth. We'll change that to volumetric fog, which has a bit nicer look. And then you have your sky atmosphere, which is, as you see up here, it's a skybox. You can see it's got a little bit of a realistic world, and then a skylight. Here is where you can either have it as real-time capture, which is realistic to the scene, or you can specify a cube map, which is our HDRIs or skyboxes, which we could point to specifically. We won't be doing that here because what this will do is it'll add that light to the scene, but you won't actually be able to see it in the skybox. We'll be adding an HDRI setup that Unreal has built in. So we'll go ahead and leave that for now as going back to real-time capture because we'll be turning this off. Let's turn all this off and start from scratch. So if we turn this off here, turn off the directional light, we'll leave the fog on. And then we'll add in an HDRI. And in order to do that, you need to go to plugins if you haven't enabled it. Type in HDRI, go ahead and enable it, and then you'll have to restart the engine. So then when you come back in here, to add something to the scene, you click the plus, and then you can start typing HDRI, here, HDRI. Then we can click HDRI backdrop, and it'll add it in. And you can see it's using just a grassy field and meadow and sky, and it does start at the origin. So if your ground is near the origin, you'll just need to bump this down a little bit so that it doesn't block the ground. Okay, so we have that here, and let's move it just a little bit more down. HDRI backdrop, let's drag it back into base lighting. And then let's talk about the post-process volumes. What a post-process volume does is you can add it here as well. Post-process volume, drag it in, is it lets you control the processing of the scene. So things like exposure, which I've already made some adjustments to. So if you type in exposure, here's where you have controls for whatever you have selected up here. You can change it from where default is auto exposure histogram down to manual, because we're going to want to dial this in so every time we move the camera it isn't slowly adjusting the volume to match. So I put it on manual, and this will kind of depend on how bright your scene is, and for here I've set it to 10. So here we have a nice base. Okay, so post-process volume is on. One last thing on that is you're going to want to change it to infinite extent. By default, a volume is a volume. It's a big box and it controls the processing within the box. But here we want to control the exposure for the whole scene. So we'll change infinite extent, unbound to on. Okay, so that's done. We have our HDRI backdrop placeholder, and this is where we're going to add in our skyboxes we just made. Control space will bring up all of your different assets, and all I did was I found them in my downloads folder and drug them in. Here's a few we made. Here you can see that red one that we had. So let's go ahead and click it. You can drag it into here or just click this little arrow, and whatever you have selected will insert it. Okay, here we have that first one. You can see those big bright red lights, and it is now wrapped around our scene. It's very snug though. Let's go ahead, when you drag in an HDRI, it's very small. So let's go ahead and enlarge it to make it feel more like a sky. Pushes it out, reveals some of my other buildings that I had brought in here earlier. And yeah, so here is what a skybox looks like. I have added in a couple of cameras. So to do that, you can come here, create a camera here, create a Cine camera actor. And then once you create it, you'll be able to see them here. So let's go ahead and go into the first one I made. Here is just kind of a typical shot of the buildings, few in the distance, different ranges. You can see the red lights casting pretty strongly onto the buildings. And here you can see another camera that I've set up on these smaller ones here. If you push G while you're in your scene, you can toggle off any sort of overlays or UI overlays. So here you can see the reflections of the skybox, some of the buildings in the background. Now let's go ahead and compare some of those different skyboxes I brought in just to see how big of a difference it can make. Let's go back to the first shot and we'll open it back up, and we'll go from this bright red lights over to, let's say, this one. Get in, and you can immediately see a drastic difference in the direction of the scene. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was saying that I had found a skybox of a city, but it wasn't quite the art direction I wanted. It didn't have a lot of the colors I wanted, and it didn't have a lot of that sort of mood that you're seeing in here. So let's try to add in another one here. Here, a little bit more subtle. You get a little bit more yellows here. It's a little bit softer. And then this last one, a lot of more pinks. And then let's go over to the other camera and again, see how this compares. Here you see actually the skybox here next to the buildings. Let's add in this. You can see here skybox, building, and how it's reflecting off of all these things. This is something that you can get a little obsessed with. I really think it's something just to get a nice quick skybox in here. It's very helpful. So that's how I would treat it. But if you do imagine a specific mood, it'll let you get there so that when you're modeling out and texturing these things, it'll already be in the environment that you will later fine tune a real lighting system for. So if you're actually adding in some spotlights and things and you do plan to have more of this look and to fine tune it, it at least gives you a nice base to work from. Okay, so I set up 2 other scenes just to give you some more examples of how the HDRIs can be helpful outside of just cyberpunk. Here is more of an atom punk scene. These beautiful models came from Kitbash 3D. I threw them together because they're nice and reflective, so they'll actually have quite a big impact on how you can experience the HDRIs. Here we have the HDRI on, here's HDRI off. You can see it's just using a basic city for the reflections right now. If we open up here, go to our HDRIs we had imported, go to an Atom Punk folder I created, and let's go ahead and see here, insert, and you can see it has a huge impact on the reflections of the chrome up here especially. Watch this when I change this to the next one, but also here the yellows feel very different than they did before. Let's go ahead and reset this to see what the original was. Here, very blown out, just blue clouds, skies. Maybe you would end up treating these materials differently in Substance Designer as you're creating them because you have this kind of bland world. Again, let's go in here, create one of our more art directed ones, toggle it in. You can see here again on the chrome, in the windows, the entire environment, and again more to the drastic one. Very, very big impact. Let's get out of this camera and just toggle around and see the reflections much closer and tighter as you'd be reviewing things. Here we go, here's a nice view. Let's go ahead and give this a change. Back to default. With maybe the more subtle of the two. Much different grade. And here as well with the stronger one. Okay, so before I show you a final scene in Unreal, which is more in my style and something I tease on Instagram if you follow me there, I'm going to show you very quickly over in Blender how to set up an HDRI. It's also very easy and built in. Let's pop open Blender. So here we are in Blender in a blank viewport. Let's add in a mesh with some beautiful modeling just to have an example of something to see our skybox against. We are currently in just solid mode here. Click over in here. This is where we can add in our HDRI or skybox. In this view, come down to the world, add new, come into color, and change this to environment texture. Throws in pink just as a placeholder, but by clicking open, we can go to our downloads and select our HDRI. I'll go ahead and select mine, and I've added in one of the ones that we just generated, and you can already see, even though our gray box is just gray, you can already see the HDRI taking an effect. So really quick and easy to set up in Blender. We can go back to viewport mode, it'll toggle it off, and then we can continue our modeling, toggle back in, and we have our different HDRIs we can add. Really quick and easy. Okay, let's hop back over to Unreal. Here we are back in Unreal 5 in the scene that I had teased earlier in the video. It's a very, very simple scene. If you can see, if I toggle out of the camera, we have two characters, a rover, a rock, a cliff, our nice HDRI, texture on the world, and I've set up a couple cameras. So let's hop into one of those cameras. Let's go to camera 1. Once you've added in your camera, you can come down, set your blade counts, you can set your focus here. Sometimes it gets a little rough with the focus. It can't quite get things that are too close. So you can turn on the debug plane and just manually move it to where you want to focus and then toggle that back off. You can set your aperture for that depth of field and your focal length here, and then set up your camera. You have this nice, beautiful shots. Again, default lighting like I showed before. If you want to toggle that on, of course the exposure is too high, but it's just basic daylight lighting, back off. I've added in my HDRI, set it to a large size to make sure it encompasses the world, and then just added in my HDRI, and I've controlled the exposure again through that post-process volume set to infinite extent, typed in exposure, dialed it in to where it made sense with this specific skybox that I made in SkyboxAI. And then just as like kind of a final touch, I've added in an exponential height fog set to volumetric. Maybe you wanted to make it a little bit more mysterious. We can dial up this fog. Let's say 2.1. Here it feels a little bit more dystopian. He's lost on this planet. It's a really nice look that you can achieve really easily with these skyboxes. So let's go to camera 2 here. I want to just compare the skybox in this scene to the default one. So here we have the skybox. You can of course rotate it if you want to bring in more of, say, the pinks or maybe specific mountains even in the background. Like I said before, you don't need to model them. You could just add them back there if they're just simple silhouette shapes. But let's get back into camera 2. Let's leave our fog off for now, and then let's compare this to default. So here would be a default HDRI. I think you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. And then let's add back in our ones that we've had. Let's go back to open up here, go back to our HDRIs. Make sure we have it selected, toggle it back in. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. Let's compare one of the other ones that I'd added in here. It's a little bit more pinkish, a little bit more subtle glowing. Let's add back in the fog. Notice there's a little bit of a bug that I get sometimes. If I try to change HDRIs while the fog is on, everything will dim. I'll have to reset the exposure. So I'll just toggle this off. Back here, bring it in, fog on, and really dial that in. Let's bring it real strong, see how strong we can get it. Toggle into full screen. Okay, so yeah, that's it. I hope that these examples were illustrative in how powerful a tool like this can be in the early stages of a project. Of course, if I was actually creating this scene and I really wanted to dial in the lights, I would spend a lot of time fine-tuning and making sure that the lights are reflecting in the right places and I'm telling the right story. But just as an initial test, getting the right mood in a world, this is extremely powerful. So I'm very excited to see what else Skybox offers us in the future, and of course what other tools AI is going to let us explore and help get our projects kickstarted off the ground quicker, to see our visions earlier into projects like I mentioned. So yeah, I hope you found that all helpful, or at least interesting. I'm still trying to experiment with balance to find a good middle ground between beginner-friendly overviews that give enough context for those still new to 3D, but still interested in how AI is beginning to shape the space, and hopefully short and to the point enough for those of you who are already familiar with 3D. For those of you interested, I've also left a link in the description for 10 free skyboxes that I generated and use, including the ones that you see in this video. And finally, for those of you who've stuck around, let's give that new tool I teased earlier a quick look. So here it is. It's called Reverie AI, and it promises copy and paste from an image into Unreal 5. You can see 80 Level covered it here on September 5th, where they show a little demo of what the tool will eventually allow you to copy and paste. Interestingly, it starts with overall art direction at the top of the list. I'm very curious what that's going to include, but it also includes lighting, weather, landscape, and even soundscape. From the tests I've seen so far, most of what is being done to them is very similar to what we covered today, where you copy from an image and paste it into Unreal, and it automatically sets up that skybox for the image and lighting, that post-process volume for the exposure to match the image, and also a bit of height fog to match the atmosphere within the image. He promises a release later this year, so since it's already October, it seems we'll already be playing with an early access of this quite soon, which I'll keep you all updated on. He's quite active on Twitter and has a newsletter for updates, so if it sounds interesting, check out his site. I'll leave a link in the description, but I'll also update as soon as we get access to the tool itself. So yeah, again, I hope you found today's video helpful. Speaking of newsletters, I've also recently launched a Future Familiar newsletter where if you don't have time to check news sites every day and you still want a 5-minute summary each week or month on the new tools and tech dropping, especially as AI continues to evolve and shape the world building space, I'll leave a link for that in the description. So whether it's over there in the newsletter or over here on YouTube, I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate all the support. Until then, I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one.